I have to admit to you guys, I feel really pissed off at the moment. I felt better over the last few days knowing that summer had arrived, but I understand that tomorrow it's going to start raining for 2 weeks. Great. The last video I did, I shouldn't really have bothered uploading it because I just felt fed up. And having reviewed it before I did, I realised it came across hugely. But never mind. Anyway, I digress. Did you see last Friday's so-called car crash interview with Nigel Farage on LBC? He was being interviewed by James O'Brien, whoever he is. O'Brien also penned the following article for the Daily Mail. What you need to know about Nigel Farage before you vote this Thursday. Bizarrely, it was posted at 1 in the morning. However, O'Brien in this article is basically saying how there was always something wrong with Farage, how everybody was laughing with him, but O'Brien, secret squirrel that he is, he wasn't laughing, he was eyeing wearily. The article goes on to claim that for a moment, O'Brien managed to get the real Nigel Farage to stand up, but just for a moment. I watched the interview before my son's football tournament this morning. They lost in the semi-final 4-1. But my son was the team's top goal scorer with 4 goals, including a hat-trick in 1 game. I can tell you now that if O'Brien had treated any politician from the Tories, Labour or the Lib Dems that way, then I have no doubt we would never hear from this scruffy trendy ever again, because he'd simply be sacked. I'd love to see him attack Nick Clegg on the Liberals covering up Cyril Smith's child sex abuse, or attack Ed Miliband for Tony Blair's war crimes, or attack Cameron for all the paedophiles in his government, but he won't. He attacked Farage the way he did because Farage is an easy target, so O'Brien gets the go-ahead to treat him the way he did, because the establishment want to demonise Farage as much as possible. If you get 20 minutes spare, have a look at the interview. It makes good YouTube, I guess. He even brought up a lunch date that Farage had back in 1997. That's how low O'Brien stooped. But what O'Brien doesn't realise, and I'm not sure that the establishment realise, that this is not about UKIP. And it's definitely not about Nigel Farage. This is about change. UKIP are the vehicle that we currently have for this change. The Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats all want more integration with the EU, not less. They all want us to hand over more and more power so that the few unelected in Brussels can control over 500 million people without a single vote being cast for it. Cameron gave a cast-iron guarantee of a referendum. He lied. Spittyban wants us to be swallowed up by the EU completely, and so does Clegg. They're playing on your ignorance that you don't know that the Lisbon Treaty is a self-amending treaty. Look it up. There will not be another treaty change. There will not be another treaty. The issue that O'Brien seems not to understand and be mentally unable to grasp is that there's a movement afoot. And it's about Europe in general and our country's freedom. It's about being governed by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. Bureaucrats that we can't vote for, against, and we can't remove from power. It's about paying £53 million a day. It's about forcing 75% of our laws onto us with no comeback. And yes, it's about controlled immigration. Now that doesn't make me a racist, O'Brien, you fucking idiot. Grow up and join the real world, mate. It's about being able to govern ourselves. It's about losing our country's sovereignty. It's about wiping out our history. I couldn't give a shit about Nigel Farage. I couldn't give a shit who Nigel Farage had lunch with in 1997. I couldn't give a shit how much allowance Farage has spent since he became an MP. I couldn't give a shit if Farage was an unpaid company secretary. I couldn't give a shit that Nigel Farage's wife is German. I just don't care about that. I care about freedom and democracy, and despite what James O'Brien might say, the EU is a lot of things, but democratic it is not. I care about the UK not allowing us to be swallowed up by dictators in the EU, which is what the Tories, Labour and the Lib Dems all want. I think some of the things that UKIP stand for are ridiculous, and I wouldn't want them forced on me either. But if this country stands any chance of a future from everything being dictatorially forced upon us by an unelected cabal, regardless of the impact, then we must leave the EU now. Look at the way O'Brien arrogantly puts the questions to Farage in this interview. Does O'Brien not have a family? Does he have kids? If he does he not worry that they will grow up under a dictatorial regime if he gets his way? The EU Commission is unelected. Does he not care about that? O'Brien strikes me as the kind of guy who'd defend the establishment for funding Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria despite 7/7 and 9/11. He's a short-sighted muppet who's probably been planning his attack on Farage for years and will no doubt feel great about his pathetic attempts to demonise him, thinking it a job well done. But he needs to wake up and be big enough to debate instead of just throwing cheap shots. And take a look around him at what is actually going on and not just follow the script he's given. You scumbag, O'Brien.